Tonight, you will lose consciousness for roughly 8 hours. Your eyes will close. Your muscles will go slack. You will lie there, blind and unmoving, in the most defenseless state your body ever enters. And nothing will eat you. You don't think about this. Most people never do. Sleep feels safe because it has always felt safe, and you assume that's simply how things are. But the real answer is far stranger. For most of your species' history, sleep should have been a death sentence, not a nightly ritual. Predators were everywhere. Darkness hid everything. And yet your ancestors closed their eyes anyway, generation after generation, and lived long enough to pass that habit on to you. So what changed? Or better yet, what was actually happening while they slept? Sleep is a strange evolutionary gamble. During sleep, you cannot see danger approaching. You cannot smell smoke until it's thick. You cannot outrun a threat because your muscles are partially paralyzed during the deepest stage of rest, a state scientists call REM atonia. Your brain deliberately shuts off your ability to move. For an animal surrounded by lions, hyenas, and leopards, this sounds like an evolutionary mistake. A species that regularly disables its own defenses should not have survived long enough to build cities. But here's the twist most people never learn. Sleep wasn't a vulnerability your ancestors simply tolerated. It was a problem they solved through each other. Anthropologist Carol Worthman spent years studying sleep patterns among hunter-gatherer societies, including groups in Africa where traditional sleeping arrangements still resemble those of early humans. What she found broke the modern assumption that sleep is a private, individual act. In these communities, people rarely sleep alone. They sleep in clusters, bodies close together, often around a fire that never fully goes out. Someone is almost always stirring. Infants wake and are soothed without anyone fully surfacing from sleep. The group, as a whole, is never completely unconscious at the same time. Think about what that means. Sleep, for most of human history, was not something you did alone in a sealed room. It was something you did inside a small, living wall of other people. Sleep researcher David Sampson has studied this pattern directly among the Hadza, a hunter-gatherer community in Tanzania, whose way of life offers one of the closest living windows into ancestral human behavior. Sampson and his team tracked sleep using wearable monitors and found something unexpected. At almost any given moment during the night, at least one adult in the camp was awake, not standing guard on purpose, not assigned a shift, just naturally, staggered, out of sync with everyone else, because human sleep cycles aren't perfectly synchronized to begin with. This staggered wakefulness functioned like a rotating watch, except nobody had to organize it. It emerged on its own, from the simple biological fact that not everyone falls asleep or wakes up at the same time. A predator approaching a Hadza camp at 2 a.m. wasn't approaching a camp of unconscious targets. It was approaching a group where someone somewhere was very likely stirring, listening, half aware. Here's where it gets stranger. This wasn't just about wakefulness, it was about trust. Primatologist Charles Nunn has studied sleep across dozens of primate species and found a consistent pattern. The more socially bonded a group is, the more relaxed and deep their sleep tends to be. Animals that don't trust their neighbors sleep lightly, waking constantly, never entering the deepest, most restorative stages of rest. Animals embedded in strong cooperative groups sleep more soundly, because the group itself functions as a shared nervous system. You don't need to stay half alert if you trust that someone else already is. This is where your ancestors' real survival strategy comes into focus. It wasn't claws. It wasn't speed. It wasn't strength. It was each other. A human sleeping alone in the open grassland 600,000 years ago was an easy meal. A human sleeping inside a circle of a dozen others, near a fire, with someone always stirring, was a much harder target. Predators are opportunistic. They look for the isolated, the unguarded, the silent. A group sleeping together, breathing together, occasionally shifting and murmuring together, doesn't look silent. It looks alive, even in rest. Fire changed the equation further. Controlled fire pushed back the range at which predators would approach at all. Large carnivores are instinctively wary of flame. A burning camp wasn't just warmth. It was a boundary. A line predators didn't want to cross, extending the effective safety of sleep outward in every direction. Your ancestors didn't need to stay awake all night to be safe. They needed a fire, a group, and the simple staggered rhythm of human sleep cycles doing the rest. Consider the physical layout of a typical ancestral sleeping arrangement more closely. Bodies weren't scattered randomly. Older adults, whose sleep tends to be lighter and shorter due to age-related changes in circadian rhythm, often ended up positioned near the edges of the group, whether by habit or unconscious arrangement. Younger, more vulnerable members, especially children, were tucked toward the center, surrounded on all sides by sleeping and semi-waking adults. This wasn't a rule written down anywhere. It emerged the way most survival behaviors emerge, through the slow trial and error of thousands of generations, favoring whichever arrangement happened to keep more people alive long enough to reproduce. Anthropologist Carol Worthman has also pointed out that this cluster sleeping pattern likely shaped something deeper than just physical safety. It shaped emotional development. Infants who slept surrounded by multiple adults experienced almost constant physical contact and reassurance throughout the night. Something modern solitary infant sleep, common in many industrialized cultures today, simply doesn't replicate. The nervous system calibrations formed during those earliest nights, according to attachment researchers, may still influence how comfortable a person feels sleeping alone as an adult, long after any real predator risk has vanished. Now think about how you sleep tonight. Alone, most likely. Behind a locked door, in a room with walls thick enough that a predator has never been a realistic concern in your lifetime. You don't sleep in a circle of relatives. You don't have a fire holding back the dark, and yet you still feel the pull of certain instincts your ancestors would recognize immediately. You still sleep better next to someone you trust. You still feel a specific, nameless unease sleeping in an unfamiliar place alone. You still, if you're honest, sleep a little lighter in a hotel room than you do at home. That isn't anxiety malfunctioning. That's 600,000 years of shared, watchful sleep, still quietly running in the background of your nervous system, even though the lions are gone. There's something worth sitting with here. The safety you feel every night isn't really about walls or locks. It's inherited. It's the residue of an ancient system where survival depended on being surrounded by people who were, even unconsciously, watching over you, while you couldn't watch over yourself. Modern life replaced the fire and the circle with drywall and a deadbolt, but the underlying need never disappeared. It just found new shapes to live in. This might also explain something strange about modern insomnia, a condition largely unheard of in the hunter-gatherer communities researchers like David Sampson have studied. The Hadza, despite sleeping on the ground with no mattress, no blackout curtains, and no white noise machine, report remarkably little difficulty falling or staying asleep. Some researchers suspect part of the reason is precisely the presence of other bodies nearby. Sleeping in isolation removes the ancestral cue your nervous system uses to confirm that it's safe enough to fully release into deep rest. Without another person's breathing, shifting, or quiet presence nearby, some part of your ancient wiring may stay just slightly more alert than it needs to be, waiting for a signal of safety that a locked door alone cannot provide. This doesn't mean solitary sleep is unnatural or wrong. Human sleep arrangements have shifted enormously as environments have changed, and your body is remarkably adaptable. But it does help explain why certain small things still soothe people so effectively at night. The sound of another person breathing in the next room, a pet curled up nearby, even background noise mimicking the presence of others. These aren't quirks. They're echoes of an ancestral formula for safety, one built around presence rather than isolation. Your body still remembers what it means to be vulnerable in the dark. And it still remembers that the answer was never toughness. The answer was proximity. The answer was other people, close enough to stir when you couldn't. Tonight, when you lose consciousness for roughly 8 hours, you won't be alone in the way it feels. Somewhere in your oldest wiring, you'll still be sleeping the way your ancestors did. Not defenseless, just quietly, invisibly, watched over.